Um, Brother Greg, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me for this interview. I know it wasn't necessarily something you were planning to do, but that seems to just be your whole meeting this weekend. Could we start just kind of talking about some of the highlights from your last missions trip? Us from the States, we really don't have a good perspective of what the truth looks like in a different environment, different culture. It almost feels like a different time out there.
So I think the first thing to think about, they are primarily where we were maybe 50 to 70 years ago, as far as in how they interact with people. How do they get to the meeting? It's probably some of the same reasons. If you go back to some of the history of even how some of the different camp meetings started in the States, there was just a wanting to get together, wanting to fellowship, and a need for that, and just sort of trying to get all of them together. And I think when they come together, there is no such thing as vacations like we have here in the States.
Mm-hmm.
Their time away from home is very precious to them, because that's the way they live off the land. They're living every day is sort of cooking and hard work. It's cooking over an open fire. Mm-hmm. There's no such thing as stoves and microwaves, all of those different things. And so for these things to get together, they get together, and they actually, a lot of them don't have a whole lot of food many times, but the church provides, and a lot of times it's the state's providing money for the church, for the meetings that they have. And so they get together, and for them, it's a time of true fellowship. Not that we don't have true fellowship here, but it's for them. Their meals that they get are probably much better than what they get at home.
So it's almost like a feast.
It's almost
like the festivals of old.
It is. It is. They have better food than they would at home. A lot of them do, mm-hmm. And so for them, it's a time to get together. Their knowledge of the truth is probably this. Then again, it's unique, and I say unique. It's still the same truth, but their understanding of it is a little bit different. Mm-hmm. And so we really want to just keep it to the basics, mm-hmm. when we go over there. And it's really just the salvation, sanctification, nothing really deep. And mm-hmm. It's always a little bit challenging because of the language barrier. That's one of
mm-hmm.
the biggest challenges that I see, because even the translations of the Bible, sometimes they're different, and they use. It's almost like we have the King James Version. A lot of times when we're studying, we will use maybe the Greek, or the Hebrew. Use mm-hmm. different Bible resources. It's the same thing for them, so because they're using a different translated Bible.
So it's almost like you have to go in, okay, I'm not going to use any of the buzzwords, the vernacular we have, and how can I explain this at the most basic level when I'm talking to something that's completely different time and era?
Correct. And so, and they are hungry for the truth. A lot of them are, mm-hmm. and they want to know. I feel like the last time I have been 4 times now, and I feel like every time I go, there's some growth there, and that's what we want to see, is growth every time we go. We don't want to go back and rehash the same old things,
right?
And so I feel like every time we go, there's a little bit more growth. They've had some challenges as COVID set them back, I feel, quite a bit, mm-hmm. And so, but for the most part, they want to know the truth, and they're happy to be there. Even going back to like the old days, from like we heard even in this meeting that we're in now, when they used to have like a 2:30 service, or maybe have 3 services a day, mm-hmm. They do the same thing over there. So they will have a prayer meeting before we even get there, and then they'll have 2 services back to back, and then they'll have a Bible study at night, and maybe even a prayer service. So it's very similar to where we were 60 or 70 years ago, but they just want to eat up the truth. The thing is, what the challenge, the challenge for us from the United States is the translate, as preaching, because if you think about it, if we would preach an hour message here, because of the translation, that would be a 2-hour message. So there is no small talk. There's no, if I could use the word fluff,
Right.
trying to talk to the, when you're preaching, you don't, it's almost like you don't say, hi, saints, welcome,
Right.
glad to see everyone.
You just get straight to it.
You go straight into the message, and it's just, and then from there, you just continue on. So you really only need to prepare about 30 minutes worth for an hour-long message. So it makes it really challenging to cut things down, and you have to really, you've got to think about what you're preaching, and I don't say that because you're trying to make sure, not that we don't think about what we're preaching when we're up there, but it's a lot more, it's a lot easier because there's no, you want to make sure you don't offend them, and such, because these are people that have very little money. They have very little things. Their houses are very, very, very small, very rudimentary. They sleep on floors, and so some of the things that we take for granted here in the United States, you've got to make sure that you don't offend them.
Right.
And so there's a lot of, not only are you preaching the gospel, but you're also trying to think about them and where they are in their life, because none of them have cars. So a lot of times we've used cars as examples when we're preaching, but for them, there's zero cars. So when I come to as far as for the saints, most of them, when we go to a meeting, there might be, the last time I think we had 50 some people, roughly, of how many attended, and they're usually coming from 6 or 7 different congregations. And when they do, when you pull up into, we have a driver that takes us to the meeting every morning, and we are the only car that is at the meeting. There are no other cars there. The only thing that I have seen, a couple of the pastors over there have motorcycles, and so there's maybe 1, maybe 2 motorcycles.
So it almost sounds like it's like the 1800s type of time period.
It really is.
And do they have like people that do circuits, like pastors that do like a circuit riding type of thing, or anything like that? Because I know that's our history here in the States of how the gospel was spread.
Not really. I think what has happened is there's been some, and I don't know the exact history of how going to Kenya, because that's where I went this time, of how it actually got started. There's probably 6 or 7, and there has been maybe a little bit more in the times past. And usually there is a pastor over each of the congregations, just like there is at the States. And so they don't really travel a whole lot, other than because transportation is so hard to get around. And it costs money, and money is not,
it's free to walk.
It is free to walk. And some of the things that we have to get used to, that we take it for granted sometimes. There might be a congregation that is within 2 to 3 miles of each other. And you think, well, why don't you just get together? Well, if you had to walk to church, every time, 2 or 3 miles is not necessarily a short walk.
That's 6 miles if you're doing
6 miles, right? Exactly. So, and then if you had to do it for 3 times a week, that's quite a significant amount. Now, these people can mostly do it. A lot of even their very elderly saints that's what they do every day. They walk everywhere. So they're moving. It's not like they're that they can't handle that, but still, it takes time, and takes time away from making their livelihood, because they don't quit working when they get older. They're still tending to the chickens, doing their gardens, still picking tea, coffee, doing the things that they would make a livelihood.
With it being more agrarian, do they have the observance of the Sabbath or respect Sunday that way, or is that something that's not normal out there and they just work 7 days?
I don't know entirely. I do believe they respect the Sabbath, and Sunday is always a big day
Mm-hmm.
for them. And so, but I think there's, for example, one of the things that happened while we were there, there was supposed to be a Bible study one night, and we had asked the brothers how it went because we weren't there. We said, "How did your Bible study go last night?" He said, "Well, I wasn't able to go." He says, "I had to run home because my chickens were out." And he goes, so I had to make sure that I got them all back in. And so we sort of think about that, and you might sort of laugh at that, but then you realize, well, that's their life, that's their food, that's you know the eggs, and that is their livelihood. So this is they have to do this all the time to keep
Mm-hmm.
just to live.
Right.
And so, but they do respect Sundays, just like we would.
Mm-hmm.
There's really no difference. But they're much smaller congregations, much some of the very small churches, small,
Mm-hmm.
not a whole lot to them.
Now, I know I grew up Baptist, so the sect of Baptists I grew up in, mission work was such a it was almost the top thing on their list is we need to get the gospel out everywhere, and we'll let things fall to the wayside, compromise or get fanatical about. But if we're putting missionaries out in the world, we're doing God's work. Kenya is one of the places I know there was quite a number of missionaries. Do you have run-ins or experiences running into other Christian stateside people, or do you have do those congregations have run-ins with other groups?
There's a lot of other groups, a lot of other mission groups that are there. Um, in fact, a lot of the brothers, they do know of fallen Church of Gods that are there.
Mm-hmm.
And they can recognize them. They're aware enough to know that they're a sect, if you want to call it that. And so they would not have anything to do with them. But there is a heavy influence. There's a heavy challenge with who will give them the most money a lot of times. And it's usually money based. And so the ones that have it, they have it because of the truth and not because somebody will give them money. And so, but a lot of them, if they're not very solid, they will go for whoever gives them the most money.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and so you'll see a lot of churches everywhere because they are so poor. And if somebody would offer them money, they're going to be very tempted to take it. And even the money is going to be it's not significant to us here in the United States. And we would maybe scoff at how little that they would get from that. But to them that have very little, it's a really big deal.
And are they getting just cash in hand, or we're going to be supplying this building project and getting the supplies for you to build this church, or getting you some foodstuffs? How is that type of transaction happening?
Most of it is just cash. I mean, just sort of in their case, it's shillings. You'd be giving them the shillings that they would use to go to the market and buy their goods that they need, whatever they have, some clothes, food if they need it. So it would be just be able to live a little bit better. They're not they're not an ignorant people. They're very smart, and they have a lot of ingenuity to how they operate things.
Mm-hmm.
And they are very resourceful with what they have. They use it. They take care of their stuff. And so they will treat things really well when they have it. And they don't care about the things that we in the United States care about, that we put a lot of emphasis on, because they don't have to. I mean, because it's not a big deal to them. It's not big deal for them to walk through the mud, and walk through the house and say, "Hey, take your shoes off," because
We don't have shoes.
they have shoes,
Okay.
but for them, it's not a big deal to them. Um, they do take care of their stuff,
Mhm.
and they will clean them. They'll clean their shoes off, so to speak. But and I'll give you an example. We had preached a message, or had went to the service, and we went to the hotel. And this is not the church per se, but this is just in general how the people are. When we went back to the hotel, we had some muddy feet, so we wanted to take our shoes off so we wouldn't get mud through. And the lady there just said, "Just wear, just wear." And so we was like, they just don't like we're here to clean it up for you. And there was no thought of us taking care of, preventing the mud just by taking our shoes off. They were like, "Hey, we're here to serve you. We'll we'll clean this up. There's not a
Mhm.
big deal." And this is why we're always here. They work. There's no such thing as 40-hour work weeks. Their life is basically eat, sleep, work, repeat every single day, just living.
Mhm.
It's no really play whatsoever. It's all
Right.
just
Did the kids might be playing soccer or something like that, but are they what age do they start working?
they work. It's hard to say, but it's pretty young. It's a different culture because a lot of times when they get to a certain age, they go off to school at a very just like we would, but they do go to school year round. And the reason why most of the time we have the meetings, if you ever hear of us having a meeting, we go usually in either April, August, or December, and that's because the kids are out of school, so they want to try to get them to come to the services as well because they go to school.
Mhm.
But it's a different culture because they don't just raise them up, your mom and dad. A lot of times they get to a certain age and their uncle will take over and they will be sort of the father figure in the village, in the family unit. And so it's sort of, they all work together. And when I think about and I look on it with these people and I read the Bible, it sort of reminds me of how they lived back
Mhm.
in Jesus's day when it was just a small village. They all were banding together, you know, to eat. They would share everything. It's no big deal, um, for you to wear muddy shoes, so to speak. That's a very minor thing in their life. The major things are just eating and living and,
Right.
taking care of each other, taking care of the elderly, just making sure that, you know, everything is smooth in the village, so to speak,
Mhm.
at a very humble
Yeah.
area. I mean, in a very humble sense of the word, it just very compared to what we're used to in the United States.
Yeah, and, putting it in that context, it makes what the gospel is, what the simple living of Christ is. It's just we're part of this little village and Christ is the head. He's leading this way. He's going to provide. We just need to put in our effort and don't worry about these things. We get so caught up on all these minor inconveniences or offenses and we kind of lose track of that simplicity of life.
And I think a lot of times, if you think about, we have so much access to be able to see things. I mean, here in the States, we can see the big houses. We can see a lot of the rich people, the people with fancy cars, and all of those type of things. And over there, they don't know anything about it. They don't know what a rich house is, so to speak, because they don't have access to see that. And because now it's changing in the last 5 years. I've seen a lot more cell phones come in, so they have a lot more access to the internet. But they don't understand. It's almost like a fantasy world for the first world countries, to see what they have. They don't have any context. It's just this is all they've ever known.
Mhm.
So they're happy with the very little that they have. They don't care about things in life. They're just happy with having food and they're enjoying, even the children are enjoying very little. They'll enjoy very minor things in our life. we hand out on the last day of the meeting on Sunday, we hand out candy, and it's basically the size of a um, Tootsie Roll, if you just a little small Tootsie Roll. And you would think we were giving them $1,000. And they're just like, just give us some sugar. And it's kind of, and they're just saying, they're looking at it as a treat. And it's just a little small Tootsie Roll, and we're thinking it's size candy. And when we'll go back to eating, they have some of the best fruit that you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, why do you need this little piece of candy? But they're so happy with just having just the little things. They don't need anything to make them happy. It's because it's all they've ever known.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very humbling to go over there to think you give them, and this is not only for kids, this is for the adults. They very rarely know what candy is. And so for them, this is a very special treat.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, our children,
you've got aisles dedicated
dedicated for candy and all of that type of things. And our children get it. Well, we try to limit them, but they get it weekly or daily if they would want it. And it doesn't cost, here, we don't even think about it a whole lot, but over there, it's a huge deal.
And even as extravagant as our first world lifestyle is, where we're living like kings of a century ago, discontentment is at an all-time high. People are depressed, anxious. We're not getting the full package. We're losing a lot with getting these things.
Right. We're very spoiled.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I come back, I know it's not realistic, but I'm ready to sell everything almost and just sort of live more humbly, I guess, if you want to call it that. Just simple life, because everything that we have, we got to take care of it. And they don't have to take care of a whole lot because they don't have a whole lot to take care of.
Right.
And so what is the purpose in life, and what makes you happy? It's what's in our soul. It's not what things that we have, because they will rust away. Mm-hmm. They'll go away, but they have what's everlasting. And so they're just as happy. The children, I don't see sad children running around. They are very content with what they have.
Mm-hmm.
They love getting their picture, and they love singing for you, mm-hmm. and doing what children do, and it's always makes you very thankful when you go over and see them. Just how they treat us Americans as when we come over there as, I don't want to like to use the word gods, but they sort of look to us as, who are these people from the United States that are mm-hmm. from the Americas that are coming to help us.
That's incredible. Changing gears a little bit here, what inspired you to do your first missions trip? Because being a Baptist, people would go in there, they'd be a permanent resident. And that was a big thing for me to kind of change my mindset on. And maybe we can talk about that some. A lot of the missionaries I knew were people that just went and permanently were resident there, but they went around the country collecting funding and getting all these things so then they could start their work, and they would have nobody out there. And it's just a completely different system of the way the Church of God does it. What drew you into going on missions trips?
Thinking about it now, I think it wasn't something that I had sort of thought I'm going to do a mission trip. I think a lot of it started when I was young, working in the kingdom of God, working with the Church of God. I live in Virginia. We have a camp meeting, and we was just always working. And we would see people come in from all over the world. And so it became one of those things. We would hear the mission report. I would hear the mission report of people that have gone to different countries and have done sort of mission work, and mission work is not can take on several different forms. Sometimes it has been, hey, we need to go build a building, and so let me go help build a mission. And I think a lot of times, a lot of churches will do sort of the labor behind the mission. So it's building a church, building a house, building, getting water, doing those type of things, and which is all well and good. And we will continue to do those. But when I was started, I was asked to go with um, one of the elder ministers to go on my first one, um, 6 years ago, I think. And once you've went one time, it changes you for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and really, when we're going over there, we're going over there to teach. So when we do a mission trip, it's more a teaching trip, and that's why it's almost it is having a meeting, a camp meeting type of an event, or a fellowship meeting type of an event. And so we are the teachers. And actually, when we go over there, when they introduce us in the mornings or in the afternoon, they introduce us as, here's the morning teacher. So we are teaching. That's really what we're doing over there. So um, that's how I got started. I was just asked, and then once you do that, obviously you have to have it's more than a burden. I think it's a great need, and you got to have some discernment with it, because just to understand how to relate to these people is very much a challenge. And it goes back to what I've already said with how they live, how things don't relate, because you can make a mess of it if you don't relate to people um, with anything that you do, but
Mm-hmm.
especially over there, you
Mm-hmm.
can really make them upset really quick, make them jealous, you could do a lot of things if you can't get on their level. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the challenge. It's not easy just to go in there and preach like we always preached with any other give a lesson,
Mm-hmm.
because they can't relate. So you have to be able to do that. So I've done it, I believe, 4 or 5 times now at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I go, it gives me a desire. What's next? How can we help them? How can we see them grow? The goal is for them to get into a spot where they can handle their own problems and do their own things. And I think they're getting there, but it still takes some work. It's not. It just takes a constant cultivating of
Mm-hmm.
these souls, and making sure that they uh, are really getting it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard sometimes because we don't go over there as often as we should. When I started, unfortunately, um, I think the first time I went was in December of 2019, and we were planning to go back right after that. And I don't, I didn't get back till 2022, maybe,
Right.
or 2023, because of COVID
Mm-hmm.
and all the restrictions that we had. And they had a lot of challenges over there, a lot of restrictions themselves of trying to even get over there. And so they did. It was very difficult on them over there. So because I couldn't go back for quite a while, and so finally was able to go back, and we tried to keep going, but um, I haven't went back obviously 3 times a year. Because it's hard. It takes a
Mm-hmm.
lot of time. It's a lot of hard travel. It's
Mm-hmm.
not easy just to get over there, and just having the resources just to be able to stay over there. It's difficult.
Why do you think, I'm not the best with church history, but I've heard you're a history buff. Um, the last major missionary deployment, I'll use that word, was Sister Gearhart out in the Philippines. Well, why haven't we had another one? Because that was decades ago, right? What's your theory on?
The challenge, I believe, is we've we grow up, we get married, we have children, and we've got to support them. Sister Gearhart, you look at what she did. I don't believe she was married. She was able to just pick up and go. And we have used to live in the American dream
Mm-hmm.
because we're very fortunate where we live. And to really, really take a step back, I think is really, really difficult for people to do. To just be able to drop everything, drop a career, drop everything and go. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge that we have. And it causes you to look pretty deep because you realize, hey, I make more than in probably one day than some of these people make in a year. And we could go over there and live, but are you willing to give up for your whole family to go from having what we do have to
Mm-hmm.
go and live in a country, in a third world country? It's not for everybody.
Right.
And I realize a calling is for an individual a lot of times, but if you have a family, your whole family is going, and it's a consecration of your whole family, not just
Mm-hmm.
an individual. And so I think a lot of times what has happened is we haven't went over there like we probably should because it's really difficult to take a really hard step back because that's what you're doing. You're going from a first world country. I don't care how poor you are in the United States, you are rich compared to what you're going to over there.
Right.
And so the accommodations are a challenge for what you can get over there and what I would want to put my wife and children into. And I think that's the challenge
Mm-hmm.
of why people haven't gone over there, which makes it sad at
Mm-hmm.
a part of us, because part of me would love to go over there all the time, but what's the feasibility of it? It's just really, it's almost not feasible to do it now. But if you have a love for it,
Mm-hmm.
and God says do it, you're going to do it. But the whole family's got to get on board.
Mm-hmm.
But Sister Gearhart, she was on her own. If you go back to Sister Faith Stewart, she had a burden for the children, and a lot of that for the children. A lot of those people that have done a lot what she did, it's still carrying on today,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of them are. The church is thriving because of what was established way back when.
Right. So it's almost like there's we get so in our one track mind of how life should be that we eliminate some of the possibilities that God might use us for.
Absolutely. I think we have to realize that this is not the Church of God is not a Church of America.
Mm-hmm.
Now the church in America sort of operates with minor differences, the same for every congregation, but it's also the American way it's been going for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
The way that they worship is the way just the culture, I guess, if you want to call it that, is a lot different. And there's nothing wrong with the way that they worship and, serve. I think they're doing it the best that they know how. But we're used to the American way, and it's never going to work if you take the American way of how we do things and try to instill that into the Kenyan people or even any of the African countries, because there's a lot of different countries over there that have many, many congregations, probably even more than America. And a lot of times they should probably be becoming missionaries to us,
Right.
To teach us. But it's not up to us to give them the and I'm air quoting this, but American Church of God. It's the Church of God, universal, so to speak.
Right.
And living by the truth is the truth, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not the way that it's not American way.
What is a miracle that you've experienced in your life?
I think the one that comes to mind first right off the top of my head, I had my daughter had broke her arm, and so we had taken her in, and it was over she was on the holiday break during Christmas time, and we had to go get it taken off. And she was she had like I said, she had broke her arm, and so we had to go get when it came time to go take it off. She had been complaining of her hip for some reason, even though she had a broken arm. Well, when we went in to take off the cast, the doctor had saw her limping and says, "I want to take a look at that."
Mm-hmm.
And he took a look at it, and he got really concerned. He says, he goes, "I think you need to get an MRI." And we had didn't know what it was, but they threw out the C word, the cancer word. And so they sent us to a oncologist. And it's one of those things where at the time, I was sort of like, what is an oncologist type of deal? Because growing up, we never went to a doctor.
Because a doctor is a doctor. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter what
exactly.
they
It doesn't
are.
matter what it is. I mean, but they have specialists, obviously. And they sent us to that. And I had seen, when I went into the MRI, I saw the face on the technician's face as they were scanning her hips. And it was a very concerning look because they've seen these things thousands of times. And so we got really under earnest prayer. And it was one of those things where the whole church got under an earnest prayer for it. And so we were just praying that, Lord, you know what this is. You know what, we wasn't our intention to even go to a doctor in the first place for this, but because of the nature, we were just trying to get her cast off,
Right.
since she had broken her arm. And so when we prayed, and they sent us back to another oncologist, and they said, we got to take another scan. And I remember at the time, our former pastor's wife, because she was little, I don't know how old she was, probably 9 or 10 at the time. I could remember her sitting on her lap, praying before we went in for these scans, just praying that may they would not be there. So we came after several weeks. We went back to the oncologist again, and of course they was telling us the sizes of what it would be, because the initial one had showed some small, I don't know, lesions or whatever they're called on her hips.
Mm-hmm.
And when we went back, they explained it away because they weren't there. And we feel like they tried to explain it away, but we sort of knew God had healed her
Mm-hmm.
of the cancer. And even to this day, and that, like you said, it's the miracle. And I think that was the greatest miracle that I've seen it for my family.
Mm-hmm.
And the last little bit, it's been 6 or 7 years ago now, but to see what God did,
Mm-hmm.
and to know, because I watched the faces of these doctors, I saw the seriousness of it. We seen the X-rays of it, and then to come back and to explain it away, we knew it was
Right.
not anything they had done, because there was no surgery done, no medication taken. It was just God that had worked it out.
Right. So for our listeners, there's this concept that we kind of use, a vernacular we use in the Church of God, of your trophy room. You've got, so that what you described right there would be one of your trophies in your hall of just great successes: salvation, sanctification, healing, something dramatic like that. What are some other trophies you have in that room that help you when you are going through a difficult trial, or dealing with an affliction, hard times at work. What are some other trophies you have, or is the experiences you've had going to Africa, just kind of seeing the life, and then you're dealing with, oh man, the traffic on the way to DC is just horrible. Like, how do you overcome your trials when they come?
I think that since I have been going to Africa, it puts things into a lot of perspective of things that don't really matter. And the things that that Americans get worked up about, when you've been over there and seen how little people have, you realize it really doesn't matter. Some of the things that we worry about and stress about, I've learned that it really doesn't matter. And I think some of those, I feel like I'm a very patient person, and I feel like I'm also a very calm person,
Mm-hmm.
and I've always tried to stay grounded, so to speak, uh, with everything that I do. And I think going overseas has really continues to ground me even more, to sort of think, is this really worth stressing about? And there are things that we have to be concerned about, but then there's a lot of things that we realize, do we really have to be stressed out about these type of things? But there's a lot of things that I go to that I grew up in the Church of God. I grew up, going to camp meetings, doing all of these things. So I've seen what God has done, not only for my life individually, but I've seen him work in so many ways that I just know it's real.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and a lot of times it's hard I look back at sort of my path of what, even like my career path, how I got married, and think of how God worked everything out. A lot of times I didn't recognize it at the time, but I look at it now and think, Lord, you had a hand in some of
Right.
these things. And some of the bad things that happened to me when I was young, and I say bad, just I thought they were bad. And I look back on them now and think there was a miracle that was done, and I could look at that as a trophy room. And now that I'm not a pastor, but I do get up in front of people, obviously going on mission trips, uh, preaching in services ever so often.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I can help people that have been raised in the truth to understand that life is going to throw you curveballs, whether you've coming out of the world or whether you've were raised in truth. And sort of the trophy room is just how God works. Everything has worked my life out from the start to the finish.
Mm-hmm.
I've had jobs that lasted for 3 months, and I thought, why did they only last for 3 months? Because the moved to another location.
Mm-hmm.
But that ended up being a stepping stone to the next one that would end up being exactly where I needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
I had always, maybe this is a little bit more of a funny a situation, but as far as before I got married, I always had what I wanted in life, what I thought was be the perfect Church of God wife, or just some stipulations on, God, this is what I want, and they were sort of silly at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now that I look back on it, but I didn't want anybody. I wanted somebody that was not 2 years older or 2 years younger. You, it's kind of weird, but
Hey.
and then I actually wanted somebody, I didn't have to go out of state to get married to a different congregation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I thought I knew what I wanted, sort of had it mapped out. Well, God he has a sense of humor,
It
and
sure does.
you know what? None of that worked out. And you know what? I'm so glad it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But because now I have a wonderful wife, and she's more than 2 years younger than me. um, and she was from West Virginia, and so
That's the next state over.
it's just the
Not
next
that
state
far
over. And I could never be more happy.
Mhm.
And I just think God has a way of saying, this is what you really want. Because even when growing up in high school, people would ask me, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I'd always say, anything but computers. That was my answer. And the very first job that I got out of high school was working on computers. And here we are, many, many years later, still working in the computer industry, so to speak. So it's been God has a way of making you.
Do you at least enjoy the work now? Some?
That's a loaded question. I don't mind it. I think I can do it well.
Mhm.
I I've always kept it in perspective, and I think some of the things that I have done in the last couple of years from a church perspective, I realize it is really it's provided for my family. I'm very thankful for what God has done in that regard. Um, but it's also just a job at the end of the day. And I'm happy doing it, but what is more meaningful is what I do going overseas,
Mhm.
um, working in the kingdom. Those are more fulfilling by far than any financial aspect that I can get with money.
I couldn't agree more. Um, I I've always been one that enjoys the self-improvement, business literature type of stuff, and they always are talking about building a culture that's fulfilling and purpose-driven and values, and that's just the type of books I like reading. But God has really made it clear over my career, even though I'm only 10 years into it, that really the most meaningful, purpose-driven, value-driven place to be working is in the kingdom of God. Um, and it really changes your perspective on how you approach work. You can become a workaholic and you can do all these different things, but then it comes to the performance review at the end of the year. You've done an amazing job. You're doing all these great things. Here's 2%, and we want you to actually work a little bit harder if you could. That'd be great.
Right.
That's not really that much of a reward.
That's right.
Um, and and just working in the kingdom's very fulfilling. And I've got a very young family. I've got a 4-year-old, and it's what can God have me do? Where can I be used, and where can I put my talents? And that's one of the reasons we have this podcast. Is I want to use the things that are interesting to me for the kingdom of God. And meetings like this, and just hearing what they're doing here in Idaho, hearing about mission trips is just really inspiring. And I want to be used of God wherever God would have me to be. And that feels like such a broad blank check to be handing God, but that is what sanctification is.
That's right.
You've given God a blank check. You don't know what he's going to put on there. And we need to remember that.
I have been giving a lot of opportunities with the company that I work for. I've been promoted several times. I have went on some pretty fantastic, I'll call them trips, business trips that have been really what I thought were top of the, you know, top of the bucket list type of activities. I have done a lot of things that I think the world will look at it and say, "Hey, you've accomplished something." And none of it has ever compared to the fulfillment that you get after you've been overseas, done something for God. Hands down, it's not even close.
Mm-hmm.
Because once a lot of times they always say it's about it's about the journey. It's not about the destination. And sometimes, and I found that to be true many times. The journey is, you work hard, you get to this certain point, and then once you get there, you're like, well, what did I get when I got here? Type of thing. But that's not ever the way I feel when I go on a mission trip. yes, it has its challenges, but I never feel like I've wasted time doing something. Um, and it wasn't ever rewarding. It's something that I can recall. I can recall almost every trip that I've ever been on overseas. There's always something that I can look back on it and think, this is why this is what I'm meant to do, so to speak. And not that I have to go on anymore. If I never go on another one for the rest of my life, I'll never forget it.
Hmm.
And the lessons learned that I got from going over there, not what I was given, but what they were giving me when I came back.
Hmm. Um, kind of looping back to something you were saying, just kind of with career and romance, with God works through those avenues to really teach you a lot of things, what's important, and that for me is where there's a lot of trophies for myself. I was I am a very ambitious person when it comes to my career, and I definitely have the tendency to be a workaholic if I were to ever allow myself to be. Now, my wife makes sure I don't, and God picks up the slack from there on that side of things. But um, when I got my first real job where I'm working in an office. I've got hourly, I got benefits, all those different things. I'm like, okay, well, I'd love to stay with this organization for the rest of my career, and we'll just figure out how we can be here for 25, 30 years and retire, and that's going to be great. Okay, to do that, I need to pass this one test. So I'm going to study. Missed it by 2 points. Okay, I was bad on these sections. I'm going to study. I'm going to put all my effort to getting this to be successful. Missed it by 1 point. And we couldn't afford to keep doing the exam because we only got reimbursed if you passed the exam. And it's like, okay, God, why are we not able to? We prayed, we've had the saints praying. Why are you telling me no? It's because he was wanting me to switch jobs. So we switched jobs. COVID hit. I was able to get promoted just by being experienced and whatever. And it got me down a different track. And then I switched jobs again. And now I've switched jobs more than I ever wanted to. But every single step of my career was needful for me to do what I'm doing now. If I missed a 2-year span at one of the places, I wouldn't be able to have the skill set that I have here. And it's just God making that happen, having a map for my career. And yeah, it's really encouraging for me and for any of those that are in that span of time that are listening. It just give God time, pray about it, put your best foot forward, counsel with your pastor.
Absolutely.
There's been times where even I've gotten counsel and it's like, well, this isn't the easiest path, or this doesn't feel right. And then eventually you have to go a different way per counsel. Why did I do this 7-month side quest? It seems to be for no benefit, but looking back, okay, it makes sense. I'm starting to get light, and that was a very recent thing for me, but God's making it clear. So to be a little more lighthearted, I hear you had a really rough travel back or travel to Africa.
Both.
Okay.
Both. Well, coming back was okay. Um, Going over was quite rough.
So I'm guessing most of the people listening to this podcast will be first world people. How did you handle the stressors of all of these different things? How did God help you through that trial?
It was pretty tough, to be honest, because this was the first time. This time was, I would say, the first time that I really had a lot of roadblocks on getting
Mm-hmm.
over there. And sometimes when you sort of think, if God wants you to do something, He'll work a way, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sort of, and that was the attitude. I think was because I went back on some of the other trips that I have been on and said, Lord, if you want me to do this, here I here I am.
Right.
You will make a way regardless. I don't know why some of the I had to go through it this time.
Hmm.
Um, some of it still doesn't make sense, I guess, if you want. But I look at it and think it was, it keeps you patient.
Hmm.
It keeps you, make sure you're grounded, make sure you're stay where you're supposed to be, um, and learn that your dependency is upon God. And not that it gives you an assurance, I guess, that you are supposed to be here, even though this is what happens. It does happen that a bad trip will happen, so to speak.
Hmm.
But to see the reward once I got there made it sort of all go away.
Hmm.
And obviously, it's almost like a mother that I don't know as a man, I don't know what this is like, but they say all the pain that going through childbirth, and once you see
Hmm.
a baby, you realize all of that goes away.
Right.
And it's the very similar thing of the trip that I had this time was once I got there, I see the saints and how they embrace and how, just to see the growth out of them, it makes it forget the many, many hours of sleep that I didn't get
Hmm.
and all of the craziness that I had to go through just to get there. Um, it just sort of makes it go away, so to speak. It's fun to talk about now, but it's a story.
Yeah.
It's a story that I never want to relive, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, we're getting close to our time. So, in closing, what would you say to those that have grown up in the Church of God, have a very similar heritage to you about working in the kingdom of God? What would you say to encourage them to make that their one of their top priorities? But aside from just their personal walk with God, being active in the kingdom.
There's no greater reward that I feel that you can have than doing something for God, no matter how small. And I think it starts small. When I go over and do a mission trip, we're really servants, and I enjoy serving people, so to speak. And yes, I may be preaching to them, but this started for me at a young age, and I'll use a business term of customer service.
Hmm.
To see a customer, and I know these are not customers, so to speak, but to see people that are happy is very rewarding, and you can't take that ever away from someone.
Hmm.
Growing up, I worked in the stands at Manassas, serving people hamburgers and drinks and all of that, and a lot of it was very rewarding because yes, Manassas camp meeting is not known for being cool. It's hot. I mean, cool temperature wise. It's always hot. And so to give them to pass around a watermelon to the saints and be like, just sort of eat it up. As far what I mean by that is just like they showing the gratitude of, hey, you thought about us because it's hot out here, and giving them a cold drink or whatever it is. To hear them talk about the food and hey, we're coming to Manassas camp meeting because we like the stand food, and there's a whole lot of things that are much more important than the
Hmm.
quality of food because to be honest, it's maybe not the best quality. I mean, it might taste okay, but to hear them talk about it and just to be able to serve the people,
Hmm.
serve the saints, there's no greater reward. And so anything that you can do for God, I feel like is so rewarding. And it doesn't ever leave you feeling like, okay, what's next?
Hmm.
It's always like, let's just continue on. Let's continue serving the saints. How can we help each other? And
Hmm.
not just, it's not about serving myself. It's one thing I want to do my best work for my family, so to speak,
Hmm.
because I want, to give them everything that their dreams, so to speak, if I can say that like that. But to give it to the saints, they are saints too. The family is saints too. So to be able to do that is so rewarding.
Hmm.
And I really feel like everybody should get involved with something at an early age. And who knows where it will lead?
Right.
A lot of people want to get out front, and I don't want to ever get out in front. Every time I get up and speak, sometimes I've looked at my notes before I've got up and I thought, I don't even know how to talk. I don't even know if I can string two sentences together.
Yeah.
Did I make any sense at all? So, Lord, you're going to have to help me.
Mhm.
But anybody can serve another person. And that's what makes it much easier to get up and talk to somebody because of what God has done for me. And I'm just sharing it with somebody else. And so to be able to give them a hamburger, so to speak, and make them happy, and they talk about it for years.
Mhm.
Uh, there's nothing more rewarding than that. And it's not about being up front. It's about what you can do behind the scenes. I like being behind the scenes,
Mhm.
but ever so often God says, well, you got to get up front for a little while. And I just think, Lord, help me get back into the behind the scenes again, because that's where I feel like I can work, but sometimes God says,
It's
you can do
it's
something else.
it's almost like the pathway to the more glorious positions in the Church of God, we'll say. I know being a pastor, being a teacher, different things like that don't necessarily feel glorious because there's just so much stress and pressure and different things like that. But the pathway to being used in that capacity is the humble road. You need to be able to serve others and humble down, kind of like what Christ was talking about when he washed the disciples' feet. If anybody wants to
Absolutely.
be great, you must first minister to your fellow brother. And it's just kind of scary for those that just want to stay there, that God might have something more for you.
You never know.
Yeah.
You never know what God has for you. Just again, going back to what you said, you have to have that blank check.
Mm-hmm.
So however God wants to use that check, I'm here for it.
Yep.
I I'm not striving for it. Uh, it just sort of happens, and you sort of going back to one of your earlier questions about like how did you get into this? To be honest, I don't even know. It's just one of those things that all of a sudden is like it starts a little,
Mm-hmm.
and before you know it, you've been over there 4 or 5 times, and it's like, wow, what am I doing? Sometimes it's like a pinch me moment almost, in the negative sense of the word of what am I doing here? But you realize God wants willing servants,
Mm-hmm.
and whoever He can use, you got to be willing to do it,
Absolutely.
and you do whatever. I don't care if it's taking out the trash. Do it well,
Mm-hmm.
and you will be rewarded for it. Nobody will ever notice. You won't get I don't get a welcome party when I come back from an African trip. Like these Super Bowl stars, and they get a parade and everything else after they've done all of those things. But you've heard so many of these sports stars that once they have done that, they they reach the high, and then it's almost like they get the winner's high, and then after that, it's just they come crashing down.
Right.
And many of them are suffering after they have won, the highest echelon. I never have that when I come back from one of these trips.
Mm-hmm.
It's always you always it's always in the back of your mind. There's no remorse from it. It's always something that was for my good, and I've learned from it. And nobody else could probably understand it unless somebody else has been over there and done it.
Right.
But it's a feeling like none other, and it's very rewarding for me personally.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.